Okay. I think I'll just get started because the first part is just kind of some housekeeping stuff. Um, welcome everyone to our online Salon series presentation. I'm very happy that so many of you have been able to sign on to join us tonight and hear from our presenters. My name is Nicole Tainch, and I'm the manager of the McDowell Foundation, and I want to welcome you tonight on behalf of the foundation. For those of you who don't know a lot about McDowell, what we do is we fund teacher-led research here in the province, such as the projects you'll hear about tonight. I would like to start by acknowledging that I am currently on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis. I appreciate and honor the relationships that we have with one another that allow us to share this land and continue to work towards reconciliation. I know that we have people joining us from other territories tonight, so I hope that you're able to take a minute to reflect and consider your own relationship not only with the land, but also the people who work, live, and play there. So I'd now like to introduce Alex Schmidt from Regina Public School Teachers Associations to bring some greetings. Alex.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Schmidt. I'm a member of the executive team for the Regina Public Schools Teachers Association. I live and work on Treaty 4 territory, and while I'm on maternity leave right now, I enjoy teaching grade 3-4 in Regina. I appreciate the opportunity tonight to introduce Mary Barrow and to learn more about the work facilitated through this research. While reading up on this project, I considered a few things. Having taught in primary for 8 years, I have seen the needs within this setting before, during, and after COVID. These needs seem to be more vast and more frequent now than before. I think about how we discuss our COVID trauma classes as they move through the grades in the last few years, noting their challenges and how they differ or are more multifaceted. Finally, I thought about how teachers may say, I wish I could do this for all my students when it comes to adapting programming or providing tools and resources for particular students. To me, this research will benefit our advocacy for providing resources to the whole class, reduce stress and overstimulation for all students, and increase student capacity in complex classrooms. So I'm excited to learn more, and I appreciate your attention to this topic, Mary. And thank you from the RPSTA.
Thank you, Alex. I would now like to introduce our moderator for the evening, Ted Zurikowski. Ted is a member of the senior administrative staff at the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation and also sits on the McDowell Foundation board. So welcome, Ted. I will turn it over to you now.
Sure. Thanks, Nicole. Is my speaker okay? Are we okay? Okay, perfect. Thanks for the thumbs up. Yeah, thanks, Nicole, and thanks, Alex. Sorry I joined a little late. I was actually here at 6:45, the technology being what it is, lesson learned once again. So welcome to everybody and all the participants for sure. Very excited to be participating in this Salon series as part of the McDowell board organization, McDowell Foundation. As you know, the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation established this Dr. Sterling McDowell Foundation for Research into Teaching in 1991. The foundation itself has supported over 300 research projects, including Mary's project that we're going to learn more about tonight. All supporting materials, just so you know, including research reports, videos, and other resources that are developed through the McDowell Foundation, can be found on the McDowell Foundation website, the STF YouTube channel. Yes, there's a YouTube channel for the STF, and in the Emma Stewart Research Center. So we very much value, as a board member, I certainly value the important work of the foundation and the support that it provides to Saskatchewan teachers. We always hear about the positive impact that research projects like Mary's have on public education in Saskatchewan, and the purposeful support that they provide for both teachers and for our students. I'm personally so grateful for the time and energy that Mary and other Saskatchewan teachers and her research team have put into their projects, and especially their willingness to share their learnings with everyone else. So I, like you, are extremely excited to learn more about your research here tonight, Mary. So before I turn it over to you, though, what I'd like to do is go over a few housekeeping items and some technical pieces that we should cover. To ask questions or to make comments, folks can use the question and answer feature at the top, where you can enter in or vote on questions and comments that we'll deal with at the end of the presentation. Remember that voting will help a question or comment rise to the top of the list of questions that we'll ask at the end. We also invite you to use the raise your hand feature to speak when you can turn on your mic if that's what you prefer. As I alluded to earlier, we will be recording tonight's session for those who were unable to attend, and it will be available on the McDowell website. I think if nobody's gave a nod to Jay, Jay's here for technical support. So thank you, Jay, for letting me in tonight. And so now what I'd like to do is throw it over to Mary. Hi, Mary. Very excited to see you. Nice to meet you. And I'll get Mary to introduce herself, and then Mary will graciously take some time and share the details of her work. Once Mary's finished presenting, we'll have some time for questions and further conversation. Mary?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am very appreciative of the comments, Nicole, Alex, Ted, and thank you so much for your tech support, Jay. We couldn't be putting this presentation on without you, and thank you to those who have taken time to attend. I'm going to share my screen now, and we'll begin our presentation. I should also mention that the teachers who were a part of the project, whose classrooms are used for the research, are all present with us today, and they are going to have a moment to introduce themselves as we get started. So I am very grateful for them volunteering up and above what the original ask was of them, and you will get to hear from them as part of the presentation today, which is very exciting. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Thank you so much. Okay, wow. I'm really pleased to be here, and I'm very grateful that the McDowell Foundation was willing to fund this project. I am especially grateful to the teachers who have joined us tonight, who allowed me to come into their classrooms. Sometimes I would disrupt their routines a little bit, and they would take time to work with me, to talk with me, and they're still willing, a couple of years later, to show up on an icy winter night to share what they have learned. So my gratitude to them. All of these teachers were doing amazing things already in their rooms. They were individualizing. They were working on building student independence. They were forming close relationships with their students, and they were collaborating with other teachers. And I could see all of this as soon as I started to work with them. But it was wonderful that they were willing to let me come into their room, take pictures of all of the visual supports they were using, talk to their students, and through the process, I'm hoping that they gained some things as well as I did. I also want to make sure that I thank Angie Bockwell, who's with us tonight, who encouraged this project. And I also need to thank Zachary Urban of Zach Urban Designs, who supported with website development alongside of Matt Brace, who is an instructional designer, and to my husband, Chris Barrow, who provided some video editing for us. And of course, special thanks to the EAs, the LRTs, the administrators, the division-based professionals who allowed me to talk with them during the 10-week research phase as well. Okay, so I will also echo the land acknowledgement because we are joining you from Treaty 4 territory, as well as the homeland of the Métis. We respect and honor the treaties, and in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration, we're committed to move forward in partnership with Indigenous nations whose traditional lands include Regina Public Schools. Using co-created visual supports is one step toward decolonizing the classroom by shifting power dynamics in the classroom to include diverse perspectives and experiences of learners. The pride of co-creation of visual supports was evident in this study and allowed students to reflect and to refer back to their own work, which helped them to feel a strong sense of identity, individuality, and strength. When we think about decolonization, we think about freeing from colonizing impact and creating independence. And as I reflected on this project, I saw that the concept of Tawau, come in, you're welcome, there's room, is revealed in this project as students saw their own work and their own creations being reflected, implemented, and used in the process. And the concept of Wakotawin, kinship, interconnectedness, learning and growing together, it's not only the teacher who designs, but through the use of co-creation is also students helping to create those classroom supports and helping to learn from and teach each other and their teacher. The project revealed many ways that the practice of using visual supports as a whole class practice helped everyone to be attending, learning, and growing together, and helped with feelings of welcome. The project overview. Originally, we had wondered about doing this project in kindergarten, but having a few people put their names forward by expression of interest, we got permission to shift to grades 1, grade 2, and grades 1, 2, which is how I came across these lovely teachers who will be sharing with you tonight, who had said to me that if there weren't enough kindergarten teachers, they were interested. And I'm glad that they were. In terms of project overview, what happened was that these 4 teachers from 3 different schools were selected by random selection, and I had an opportunity to work with them each 3 times. And we had an opportunity to work collaboratively. And that was one of the things that you'll hear the teachers telling you tonight, is that collectivity, that working, supporting each other, getting to talk with teachers who taught the same grade level was really important to them. It is something that they don't always have an opportunity to do. And so that collegial collaboration piece was very helpful and very important. And also, in addition to the teachers coming together to get some professional development on using visual supports, they also got to talk to each other formally or informally while they created visual supports. So we removed the barrier of having challenges with finding items that the teachers might need, like cardstock, color printing, etc. And the teachers could see what each other were creating and why. And that inspired some use of visual supports for others as well. So each time I went into the classrooms with consent, I spoke to 5 students and asked them what was available in their classroom that was on the walls that could help them with their learning. And as we go through the presentation, we'll talk about what they noted and what they found and what implications that had for teaching practice. Similarly, I took pictures of all of their visual supports. The teachers found it extremely helpful to be able to see what other teachers of similar grade level were doing and how they were using the visual supports. And even though initially I had de-identified the supports for our meetings together, the teachers quickly were gracious enough to identify which classroom, which pictures came from, and they started to be able to talk to each other about their different practices and how they could benefit each other. So the teachers were very willing to be vulnerable, which I certainly appreciated, and led to some quality professional development. Then teachers were keeping track of items that they were adding to their visual supports repertoire. And those pictures were shared with the other students. And I also took a listing of visual support that later I could collate all of that data and triangulate to know that we were really seeing the things that we thought that we were seeing. In terms of situating myself within the research, I currently work as Intensive Support Development Coordinator with Regina Public Schools. I grew up in Regina and attended Regina Public Schools. To have the opportunity to perform action research within our own schools is quite an honor for me. I'm proud to give back to the system in which I learned and which I now work. My husband's career had taken us to Nova Scotia, where I was honored to complete master's degrees in educational psychology, human relations at Mount St. Vincent University, where I later taught. And also, I have a degree in special or inclusive education from Acadia University. I'm committed to lifelong learning, but also to applying the learning within the teaching profession. Prior to my work with Regina Public Schools, I worked in 4 other school divisions in New Brunswick, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, as a classroom teacher at a variety of levels, an early childhood educator, a language monitor supporting English learning in a francophone community, a learning center teacher supporting inclusion in the schools in which I taught, and a school administrator, as well as an autism specialist. So the use of visual supports was crucial in all of the roles that I had held prior to coming to Regina. And if you look at the literature, and you can see the literature review on the website that we produced for this project called Power of Visuals, which I will be running you through later, you will find that there is a great deal of research around the use of visual supports for particular groups. For neurodivergent learners, when I talk about neurodivergent learners, I mean those learners who have a brain that functions in a way that is biologically different from what some other people's brains might, and that is a natural part of evolution and is to be expected. So we're in a time where we need to start to be looking at the ways that can benefit all of us to live in a diverse culture. And so we knew there was a lot of research around neurodivergent learners, learners with Down syndrome, learners with intellectual disability, and other groups such as English as an additional language learners, all showing that visual supports were helpful for certain populations of students. But what was lacking was the piece where we would look at how it might just be beneficial to support all students in that way. We also knew in my role in Regina Public Schools that there was a need to support teachers of early learners and that there was a need to kind of help them to find ways to reduce their workload. So I know you'll get to hear from Brooke a little bit about how that works for her. So when I think about situating myself within this research, I knew that there were likely to be benefits, but I was really pleased to see the number of benefits that came about. And it was really exciting to have a way to do that. One thing that did come up, though, as I started to present this research to some of my colleagues in Regina Public Schools, was that we need to be cautious about the number of visual supports that we're putting onto the walls of our classrooms because we need to adhere to fire regulations within your jurisdiction. So I'm also glad that over the course of this research study, we had the chance to look at what happens when we're fading some of the visual supports for all learners, but some learners may still require an individualized visual support. And we had ways of looking at that, including taking photographs of the visual support and putting them into a small photo album, or also taking larger photos or enlarged photos and putting them into a duotang. So you'll notice when we show you the Power of Visuals website that the visuals there are 8.5 by 11. So that teachers can think about how to use them, but also be able to store them away for easy access, but without having any concerns about fire safety. Okay, so the research question was, passed ahead there. What can be learned by incorporating visual supports as a Tier 1 intervention for both neuromajority, those who are not neurodivergent, and neurodivergent students in primary classroom? And we're excited to report that actually we have some evidence that the findings are also applicable to other grade levels, though some follow-up research on that could certainly be warranted. So when we think about what some of the supports were, or the benefits were, we discovered that there were benefits to independence, problem solving, peer prompting, focus during group work tasks, reduced teacher questioning, reduced need for teacher prompting or reteaching of directions and concepts. So it was very exciting to see that there are many benefits. That's not to suggest that there were not some challenges, and we will talk a little bit about those and how to overcome some of those as well. But what was really nice is that if teachers adopt this strategy as a Tier 1 intervention, then it feeds nicely into universal design for learning. We're preventing the need for some individualized interventions by using quality teaching at the Tier 1 level. There's also some suggestive evidence from the study that, again, could use further study, that the combination of visual support use with some of the other evidence-based strategies or high-impact strategies, as John Hattie would call them, could be like visuals and teacher talk aloud or teacher think aloud, visuals and explicit teaching, visuals and play-based learning, visuals and hands-on learning, visuals and prompting with prompt grading, and visuals and exemplars. So there are many follow-up questions that certainly could happen. And there are many strategies that could definitely be used in concert with each other. And tonight we'll be talking about the acronym of ICE, which is intentionally used visuals for I, co-created for C, and E explicitly taught. And we'll give a little bit of additional information about each of these. So I am going to invite Tara Lee Franklin to introduce herself and to talk a little bit about some of the benefits around independence.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm starting with the independence part of the overview of our benefits. Um, so over time, we as teachers want our students to build independence, whether that's independence within our classroom in terms of routines, um, or also building our skill, our executive functioning skills that can also then be transferred out to the outside world. Um, we use different visuals in my classroom to help build that independence. Something as simple as a color coded sticker on our morning bins, as well as the same color sticker on the shelf to help build that independence. They they are explicitly taught the pink sticker bucket goes on the shelf with the pink sticker. Um, as well, we also use a sound wall in my classroom, and it is something that my students are shown the sounds. We go through them, we go through their mouths, where to find words that match those sounds on the sound wall. And then as they're working in literacy, they are referring back to that sound wall, um, and are able to refer their friends there as well. We also, in our classroom, utilize step-by-step directional visuals where each step has a number and a visual. So step one is always write your name. So they know that right away number one is write your name. And number two, if we're doing math, it might be to count something. Number three is to write it. And I will explicitly teach each step for that assignment. And they are able to refer to that as they are working. And if they come up to me and say, I don't know what to do next, I'm like, where do you look for that? And they are able to refer back to that. I believe Lori is next.
Lori, you're going to speak to problem solving.
Yeah, can you hear us, DS? Okay. Okay. Yeah, so my name is Lori. I'm a grade 1 teacher for the Regina Public School System and was happy to be a part of this research project. With our research, we found that using visual supports, certainly we saw an increase in individual problem solving, so that I'll talk to today. Students could refer to and use the supports available in the classroom to determine their next step. Tara Lee just talked about that in, say, a multi-step process or a task. They understood when and where. Even for transitions, we would help them know what was happening next. Say with the visual schedule you might use in your classroom. They use the visuals around the classroom to perhaps see how to write a letter or a word, the date, those sorts of things without needing to ask an adult for help. September is a great example. So, new classroom, new procedures, routines. In my classroom, I created a morning jobs visual. So, we used pictures of the students from our classroom. That was really key as well in helping, just kind of engaging the students. And so, for each step, we go to the table, we put our indoor shoes on, we get out our agenda, we go to our locker, put our things away, and we start our morning work. So eventually, this visual isn't needed any longer, but certainly helped during that first month or two of school, so they knew what to do. We found that the visual supports assisted students with individual challenges. So if you have a student who perhaps is having some difficulty or perhaps getting overwhelmed with all these winter clothes now that they have to put on, or even undressing, we created a getting dressed for winter schedule. So you would first maybe explicitly teach this to the class, the whole class. There's some great YouTube videos out there of classrooms getting ready and putting all their pieces on. And then so after you do it as a whole class. You introduce the visual. And so the students would know that, first you put on your ski pants, next you put on your neck warmer. And so that's really helpful for some of my little people, the whole group at first, while we learn to put on our winter clothes and even take them off. Again, you might use this visual for a week or two of dressing for winter, and after that, it might just be for individual use. I might have one student that used it all winter long, but the rest of the class didn't need it anymore. There's examples of problem solving, like I mentioned, the visual schedule in the classroom, so the students knew kind of what comes next in our day. Alphabet charts, I have those for students that perhaps aren't ready to move on to independently reading and writing, so they have a little reference chart on their desk. Same thing with phonics rules. I've created little phonics bookmarks that students can put in their writing journals. And some of those visuals will naturally fade as students don't need to rely on them anymore. But again, that proves that using these visuals helps that independence and problem solving. That's what I have to say about that.
Hi, I'm Karen Rilling, and I'm a grade 1-2 teacher here in Regina Public. And my portion right now is about peer prompting. So, by having visuals in the classroom being intentionally and explicitly taught, students are able to independently use them as a cue to what the teacher has asked of them. Students are able to quickly check in to see if they are doing what they should be doing or to see what step is next without interrupting. Often students are prompting their peers, or sorry, I should say, often when students are prompting their peers, there is a shift in power dynamics. Students are able to model and help others in a non intimidating way. In my classroom, for multiple step activities, I'll put the visual step up on the board, such as name, cut, sort, glue, and color, and we will go through it as a class. Very often, table mates will help each other and point out what needs to be done next. Or even if a student shows that they are done, their table mate will point to the board and ask if they are really finished all of these steps. In my classroom, I use a play-based approach, and it is a large part of my classroom community. The visuals in place in these centers allow for students to monitor each other and provide feedback of how the center is run, and even acts as a guide for their play because it's prompting their peers. Visuals in the classroom allow for teachers to have reduced need for individualized repetition because the supports are already in place.
Thank you. I should mention too that all of the participating teachers were very gracious in providing some updated photographs of their classrooms recently, which we've added to the site. But the irony of the fact that I haven't had these all added into the presentation that we're doing on visual presentations is not lost on me. But what we will do is during the overview of the website, I'll show you where all of those are, and you'll be able to see all of these beautiful visuals that the team has graciously shared with you. Brooke's going to speak next about the focus on group work tasks.
Okay. So as Sarah Lee mentioned, a goal for all teachers is to foster independence and have students feel successful on their own. Throughout this experience, it became very clear to me the power that visuals had on both whole group and small group tasks. When students had a graphic to refer to, they were first of all very much more engaged, and they were able to visualize and comprehend concepts more accurately. And they were less likely to rely on verbal reminders and teacher direction. As visuals remain consistent throughout various tasks, they began to look for those reminders even if they aren't directly mentioned by the teacher. So, for instance, in my classroom, I have some listening and focusing expectations posted at the front of the room where most of my whole group instruction takes place. This allows for students to have a visual and a silent reminder of what focusing and listening looks like. For example, like at the front of my room, I have some posters that explain whole body listening. We explicitly teach this at the beginning of the year with all students clapping, stomping, talking, and recognizing how hard it is to hear when such noise is happening. When we refer to the posters, it shows us that when our hands are still, our feet are still, our mouths are closed, um, It allows students to recognize and have the opportunity to witness the benefits that the whole body listening have. From there on, I keep the posters up, and occasionally the entire class needs to revisit the example. But at other times, just a simple name and point is enough to reset a student during the lesson. As for small group tasks, there's always like a love-hate relationship for teachers. We love the idea of working with a focused group and having the individualized time, but that also means the majority of our students are left without direct supervision, which can be scary. However, when I started to add visuals to each center, students had a way of figuring out what to do in a way that doesn't interrupt others. So that's not to say that you can just post a visual and your problems are solved. The visual really needs to be taught and practiced before um, students can apply and refer to the support on their own. So again, another example from my room is at our listening to reading station. I never really liked using the iPads, and I always tried to push it off as long as I could because I didn't like the complications that it caused. However, now posted at the center is a troubleshoot poster, which shows a step-by-step click, like clicks, each click that students need to make in order to get to their designated task. It also demonstrates what they need to do once they complete the task and how to put their technology away. Again, this is a poster we all looked at together. I gave them a problem I was having with my technology, and the students used the poster to help me follow the steps to solve the problem. I think it's also important to note that visuals don't necessarily need to be a paper that's posted, but visually can be with hand movements and gestures, physical locations in the room, um, and as certain actions, surroundings, and spaces, they create a sense of what the task is they're needing to complete. We all know that a thumbs up means they're doing really well, and maybe a serious stare means they need to think about what they're doing. And some of our participants also spoke highly of using sign language or certain hand symbols to communicate without other interruptions.
Thank you. Excellent example. Carolee, you're going to speak next to reduce teacher questioning.
Yes. So as we mentioned before, building that independence really helps to reduce your teacher questioning, and having students be able to refer to a visual during small group time means that you're able to focus directly with the group that you're working with and not have interruptions coming to ask, well, what do I do here? What do I do there? So as Karen, Lorraine, and Brooke all mentioned, using all of those visuals creates less teacher questioning, and you're able to build that independence as well as build those problem solving skills that so many of our students don't come into our classrooms with, and hopefully they will leave with.
Okay, I'm going to talk about the reduced need for teacher prompting or reteaching of directions or concepts. Visuals that are intentional and explicitly taught allow for students to gain independence in the classroom. Having a visual schedule of what the day will look like allows for students to independently look and self-regulate because of it. When visuals are paired with routines and structures, then students are able to make independent moves within the already very busy classroom. In my classroom, I have a large pencil that shows the different steps that we use for the writing process. While I'm teaching, I reference the steps throughout the pencil as the pencil grows and talk about the steps to review. And then students are able to independently work through the steps while I'm able to work with individual students who need extra supports. Visual supports are very powerful because students are able to be fluid in their roles within a small group. With visual supports in place to guide their learning, they're able to shift their roles between expert and leader and those that are needing more support. And in the next activity, those roles can be totally reversed. This reduces the need for reteaching from the teacher.
Thank you. I'm sure that our audience is appreciating the personalized examples and how you've applied the items from the research to your work. Um, as we sort of hypothesized going in, we thought there could be benefits for other groups of learners for whom research had not previously shown the benefit. But we were really pleased to see that there were additional collateral gains and that we could identify benefits for teachers and benefits for other adults supporting in or visiting classrooms as well. So, in terms of benefits for learners, mm, there was evidence that there was stronger comprehension of the concepts that were being taught when visual supports were present. And as Brooke said, remembering that E in the ICE acronym of explicitly taught is very important. It is something that some of our teachers noticed over the course of the research study when we had an opportunity to interview them pre research phase, mid, and post. And that was exciting. So we were seeing more engagement when visual supports were present. And Brooke spoke to the iPads. One of the things that I did during my visits to the classrooms was took engagement checks, noting how many students were on the assigned task and attending to that task, and how many might be doing something else. And of course, we would expect that some students would be doing something else. But in Brooke's classroom, it was really exciting to see that when she had an interactive math wall where students were matching different forms of the same number, um, to other forms of the number. And I will point out that visual to you in case you want to use it in your own classroom. That there was 100% engagement at that activity, and there was less engagement at the activity. And normally we would anticipate that there would be more engagement with the iPad. So it was exciting to see that the use of visual supports, even though it took a little bit of prep time for that activity, really led to strong teacher engagement. And before Brooke comes back to tell us about benefits to teachers, another touching story that happened in her classroom was she had a newcomer student from Ukraine, and she was trying to figure out how to communicate with the student to share instructions and to allow the student to communicate back to her. So we used a simple communication board where Brooke could start to model and point to some pictures and words around what she was saying. And the student very quickly started to communicate back to her without being explicitly told to do so. Other students, of course, were watching. And the students quickly, as soon as Brooke got up, started to go over, and they really wanted to interact with their peer, and they were excited to see that there was a way that they could do this through the use of the visual support. So that was a spontaneous piece that was really exciting to see. And Brooke, I'll let you take over for benefits for teachers. You're still muted.
Sorry about that. As teachers, we strive to do whatever it takes to benefit our students, and sometimes it's at the cost of our own time, money, and energy. Luckily, the power of visuals benefit teachers as much as it does students. Teachers are always looking ways to limit lesson prep, utilize the materials we already have, and eliminate costs. As seen in the findings, using whole group visuals benefit the entire population involved in the classroom, from students, including neurodivergent learners, guest teachers, educational assistants, and other supports. When visuals are explicitly taught to the full group, students learn to engage and use tools independently and help minimize prompting and individualize tools that includes neurodivergent learners. Also noticed was that the independent referencing and peer referencing to visuals in order to attempt tasks and problem solve independently. An interesting observation throughout this study was the benefit the visuals had on other adults who worked in the classroom. Those who worked in the space also gained common language and classroom expectations. This helps limit the amount of explanation and planning ahead of time to those other adults that are working in there. And throughout this study, collaborating adults felt confident in entering the room, providing them with common and consistent language and the tools to use when teaching concepts, managing behaviors, following routines, and prompting students. Lastly, I wanted to address how effective Mary's ICE strategy is when you can create visuals that are intentional, co-created with students, and explicitly taught. Um, It saves teachers expenses and planning time. When students hold a role in creating posters and anchor charts and so on, they are more likely to remember the concepts being taught, how to use the visual, and also feel pride in using it. An example I've used this year is creating our wow pictures, where we started off with a boring black and white landscape. Then students took turns adding details and color to it. All I had to do as a teacher was get the paper and the markers ready, and the students did the rest of the work for me. It is still in our room, as it sets the tone and provides an example of what we want our finished drawings to look like. Another example of a low-cost time-saving technique I use is simply creating groups on the fly. When we work in centers, I simply draw the centers we're using for the day. I separate the students in real time, which also allows some flexibility in who they work with, and can base the groups on the needs of that day.
Excellent. Thank you. Karen also has some insights into benefits for adults visiting the classrooms.
So when adults working in or to support students, such as an EA, an IA, admin, or guest teachers, are supported when visuals are in place and used regularly in the classroom. When an unfamiliar or someone who does not regularly visit your classroom comes in, they immediately get their bearings by referencing the visuals in the classroom. They're able to understand the general expectations in the immediate moment. These are easily understood because they are available to them at that moment. When students have been explicitly taught and intentionally taught the visual, then the adults that are supporting them are able to lean back and rely on those visuals. From the use of visuals, adults are able to see and use the consistent language when answering students or when giving individualized instructions. Often, when new adults are in the classroom, they do not have the time to discuss with other adults what the expectations and the rhythm of the classroom is. When visuals are used in the classroom, adults are able to quickly and efficiently figure out what is going on in the classroom and what routines to follow. This allows the classroom teacher to feel confident that other adults will have the information they need because the students do. Last year at my school, we had a rotation each month where we would have a new EA. This was a lot for the new person as they learned the ebbs and flow of my classroom. Each month, they would tell me how the visual supports in the classroom supported them to know what was happening next or what sound a diagraph made because they looked at our sound wall. They knew that TH was a rude sound because of the poster of the TH with a mouth with its tongue sticking out, or where students went at the end of the day because of our visual dismissal chart. Visuals in the classroom do not only support students, but also the adults that work with them.
And I would add that for our guest teachers that come into our classrooms, I don't know about you, but I've had lots of little notes in my day book when I come back about, oh, I love that chart. I took a picture of it. And just, it was really helpful for them to have that common language and know their expectations, and the students could show them the way too.
They felt supported in their day. It's not just fly by the.
Yes. But Karen, I think you had the experience too where planning became a little bit easier for your guest teacher as a result of using a visual support. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yes, like Lori said, will have remarks on my sub plan that it's like just so nice that I can say like, okay, the visual schedule is right there, and we build it together every morning. And then right beside it is the schedule that we use to like do different steps of our lesson. And then even when they go to do our calendar and they're doing kind of like the math talk portion, the visuals are right there and they can go step by step. And the students know them so well that they're like, oh, and the students know exactly what to do and they pointed me to do this. And so I feel like those guest teachers are just so supported because it's like the common language is there, the common visuals are there. It's just a more welcoming environment, and it's a better day for our students. Let's be honest.
And the subs can, in my sub notes, I'll say, refer to that writing chart on yes, like the steps on the writing chart on all, like your pencil. Yeah. Great. And Carrie, would you mind sharing a little bit about your conference time when students were referring to some of the visual supports?
That was like the most adorable thing. So in my classroom, we build our sound wall together. So every time we add a new concept, then put it up on our wall. And so at conferences, I said to, in our 3-week conferences, I said to the student, can you tell your moms and dads what your favorite phonics rule is? And so they'd turn around and they'd look at the little sound wall and they'd be like, ing. And I would say, oh, this is Lori's favorite too, budget. And then I said, ing? Why is it? And then they'd like tell the whole story to their parents how we're like these 3 brothers who are penguins and they're so cold. And so they're walking on the ice saying, ing, ing, ing. And they all got their hands out and they're doing a little dance. And it just is like the parents were like, what? I never thought of it that way. Or like, so the visuals, them seeing it and introducing their parents, they're like, okay, like I'll use that at home. And so the other benefit is bringing the parents on board to see how our classroom is run too.
I've even sent some of those phonics rules, like, yeah, the parents can use those same stories then, and that same visual we have in the classroom at home.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. So yeah, another unexpected collateral gain was that overlap to home and ensuring that the same language is used at home. In one of your classrooms, I did observe that an EA needed to come into the room partway through a math lesson. And right away, the student asked her a question. And so she, of course, started answering to the best of her knowledge, which was not the same vocabulary as we might use now in the math classroom. And the teacher was able to very quickly just reference the EA to the visuals that were up from the lesson that was just taught. And the EA was very quickly able to pivot to using that same language. And so, again, it just ensures that adults are making sure they're using that consistent vocabulary and not confusing the process, which is the other beauty of being able to send some of those visuals home, too, so that families experience the same. So I did say that there were some challenges, and amongst those included access to materials. So within the Power of Visuals website, I have actually a list of sort of essentials that schools should consider having if they're going to increase the use of visual supports, as well as some nice to have that our participants had access to during the study. Also, of course, time to create items can be a concern. And so Brooke did a lovely job of talking about how letting go of some of that control in the classroom and allowing equal partnership with students to create some of those pieces can really save teachers time and money. But within the Power of Visuals website, there's many templates that teachers can use to start and then can easily edit to make their own. And people, all of you, I think, commented on the need to let go of perfection and to realize that even if you make a quick visual in the moment, it's going to be as effective as a really beautified visual in terms of its use. So there were a few other findings which may be of interest to you as well. One is that when visuals are out of sight, at least for these young learners, they're out of mind. So I was actually doing an observation in one of the classrooms while the teacher was teaching math. So the teacher was literally talking about math and referencing the visual supports, but there was a large bookshelf between where the class was gathered to do their math lesson and where I was interviewing the students at a kidney table. And so the students knew that while they talked to me, they could get up and look around. And if they didn't know a name for a visual, they could go over and point to it. So the students were standing and were looking around. But interestingly, all 5 of the students did not say that there were any numeracy visuals in the room, even though they had done that on previous visits. And so I tried a prompt and I said, is there anything for math or numbers? And they would look around, and because that area was blocked from their view, they said no. So, like, not only is it helpful to learn with the visuals, but you will have to sometimes refer back to those visuals. So that led us to notice a couple of things. If teachers rotate the visuals regularly, it's like a new visual to them. They remember to use it. Also thinking about the positioning of the visuals. So like the word wall would need to, or the sound wall would need to be in proximity that students are facing that direction during their writing. We also knew that some learners talked about the busyness that can happen when too many visuals are up. So some of the teachers may mention starting with almost blank walls and only putting up those visuals that have been intentionally taught to the students because they may not automatically start using those without. However, the students at that age are a little bit nosy because even though they might not take a visual on the wall and start using words from it, they definitely look at teacher materials and start using words from those. So, as an example, one of the classrooms has a lovely system of labeled monthly bin with the materials for that month. So, September, October, etc. Students talked frequently about looking to that rather than to the calendar to write the month. Similarly, students would look to student name tags on lockers rather than the name on the word wall, even though it was in both locations. And that may have to do with the fact that there's sometimes a picture of the student and the name, or that they've associated a particular student going to that spot. And so it helps them to realize that's the name that they need to select, where it might be more abstract on the word wall. So just something to keep in mind that the students are definitely looking at all of the materials that you have there for teacher use as well. And then because all of these lovely teachers were willing to be vulnerable and honest with me, sometimes I would go into their classrooms and I would notice that they could use a certain visual support. And I might have it on hand and I might give it to the teacher. So, for example, a hand washing uh, visual by the sink. And I would give it to the teacher, and then I would come back the next time, and the visual might not be up and might not be in use. And I had always had the previous belief that prep work was a barrier and that if I provided the visual, then definitely it would get used. So I had to, find out a little bit more, but the teachers were honest to tell me that they really like to have the visual match the aesthetic of their classroom. And so that is one of the reasons that we went with Canva on the website for this, is that it can easily be modified to your preferred colors and fonts and so on um, to use the item. So we'll go on here to the ICE acronym: intentional, co-created, and explicitly taught. Brooke, you're up to talk about intentionality.
Okay, I'm gonna repeat a little bit about what Mary just said. But when Mary came to us looking for participants, she really wanted to emphasize that it would not be more work for us. We wouldn't be using up all our prep time. And we weren't going to need to buy a bunch of supplies. Um, she wanted to emphasize that what we had is what we could use and that would work. And that's what I want to emphasize to the audience tonight. So, as teachers, like, again, our natural instinct is to use lots of posters, buy some nice decor, and like fill our room with stuff. But sometimes those tools can be more of a distraction. They might be too wordy, or they don't really teach the concept how we would want to teach it. And these visuals just start to become mundane and stuff hanging in our room. So I was definitely this person up until working with Mary and the other participants in this project. I would hang posters about reading and writing strategies, have my number wall and my word wall all set up for the first day of school. I thought it looked nice and how a classroom was supposed to look. However, when Mary started interviewing my students, those pretty and excessive visuals were completely overlooked by them. And when I look back, like I wasn't really using them or referring to them either. But students did notice new posters that I would put up or like the little notes I would put on the board, or like visuals I would just create on a whim, that actually met what the students needed at the time. So an example of this was my newly added arrow. So when the participants were together, we were discussing some situations and I mentioned that my kids are just constantly asking me, when is lunch? When is home time? And I had a visual schedule, but they didn't really seem to know how to use it exactly. So one of the participants in the group mentioned putting an arrow, and moving it down as we completed subjects so students knew where we were in the day. Um, and that gave them a much better understanding.
like the next day after someone mentioned this to me, I went to school and I just cut out a blue arrow, like again, not very pretty. Just stuck it on the board and it was a complete game changer. It was the most simple addition to my classroom, but now it's still probably one of my most used visual in the room. Students follow the date accordingly with very little reference to where, like, sorry, with they're able to reference it on their own and not ask me so many times. It was a very intentional tool and it solved a really big problem. Um, then also, an example, Mary mentioned my number wall, which I've switched up again a little bit. But usually I would have it hanging for the when they arrived in September. And I think that can be beneficial. However, this year we co-created different ways to represent and show and describe our numbers. So once we learned a number, students would show me with their fingers or on their number line and so on. I would then take their picture and post it for the next day. At the end, we had an entire number wall created by them. It was very intentional and very relevant to the moment. And they also took a lot of pride in seeing themselves within the class. Another example, that I would just say is like the excessive amount of visuals that we can sometimes overdo it. So during the time that we did this study, my class welcomed a new student from the Ukraine who had no English whatsoever. And my first thought was to use Google Translator, which had useful times. But it was also really hard to manage for him and myself. And then someone in our group suggested that I get a communication board with visuals and pictures. And so my first thought was go to TPT and I printed off the first one I saw. It contained tons of pictures and even the sayings in English and Ukraine, which I learned were not super beneficial to him because first of all, he wasn't reading Ukraine yet or in English. And it had so many different items that just kind of distracted from the main purpose that we wanted to get to. So yeah, it just didn't quite provide what he needed. So we adjusted it, and thank you, Mary, for that. We slowly introduced a smaller chunk of visuals. So with just common things like drinking, like getting a drink, going to the bathroom, when lunchtime is. And then we slowly grew that picture bank. And when we chose more intentional visuals, we had much more success in communicating with each other. And we were both more confident in interacting with each other. It didn't feel so overwhelming. So yeah, I think the power of visuals is really in the simplicity of them. And even though we want them to look nice and attractive, we need to really focus on the usefulness of them.
Thank you, Lori. Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about the C part of our ICE acronym, the co-created. This has been a practice of mine for a long time, but as part of this research project, I just really kind of refined and reflected more on how to do these with the students and the benefits of these co-created visuals. So we found, of course, that when we co-created visuals, that the students use them more regularly. And it led to that pride and confidence in the student and their visual use. Other benefits was increased independence and problem solving, which we talked about earlier, because the learners understood how the visuals work because they helped make them. So co-creating the visual can help reduce all that pre-lesson prep work too, because when you're creating the visual to present to the learners, you're co-creating it as part of the lesson. So it's really saving you on your prep time as well. Um, so some examples that I have of that is I just kind of keep some 11 by 17 paper in my easel, some 8.5 by 11 paper in my easel, and I'll pull it out and we'll make a visual. I often do this with writing. It lends itself to writing quite often. So at the beginning of the year, we co-created my coloring anchor chart. So we talked about, the rules of coloring in grade bonds. We color in the line, no white space,
Um, I think we're going to add that visual to the website. And so as I modeled, that we're going to use I'm coloring the sun brown. Oh no, and they're so upset. And okay, well, what would that look like then if we were going to color it well? Another example would be my writing chart, similar to your pencil that you use. We co-create it together, and I just have it on an 11 by 17. It's on a magnet. I can move it around the room as we need it. And so we create it together. Okay, first we have to think. So together I draw the person thinking about an idea. And next we need to draw a picture, because sometimes if we draw, so then I model that then in my writing lesson, drawing a picture. Okay, now we need to come up with some words. And what does that look like? Maybe it's strings of letters. How would that evolve into a sentence? And I'm modeling all of that as I'm creating this anchor chart for students. And that's just that's my writing lesson during our writing time together. So I guess the other thing I would say about co-creating is that I do keep those then for next year, but things evolve. Your classes look different every year. Students are never the same. The supports they need are not the same. And so I'll keep those little samples as my reference, but as we co-create them, they will evolve and they might look different from year to year. And like we talked about, we have to give up that sort of perfection piece. They don't have to be perfect when they're in the moment. And I guess what else I would say is usually when we're thinking about visuals, we're thinking of our primary classrooms. We're thinking of grade 1 to kindergarten. But when I was speaking to this research project at one of our staff meetings, I had a middle years teacher come up to me afterwards and say, can we just chat for a moment? Like, how would this look in my classroom? I think she was teaching her 5, 6. She said, I do this writing project every year with the students. I think it's a research project. And, the product never comes out like I want it to. What could I do? How would I use a visual? And so we brainstormed some ways she might make a visual with her class. What is she looking for so that the students could produce something that she wanted. And so we thought about, okay, she could do a think aloud and she could model how she would think about her ideas and write them. The students would do the same. Model what you're looking for. They could co-create exemplars and have those up. And so she did those things. She co-created some exemplars and she came to me after and said the best project she's had. So using those visuals from K to H, higher even, definitely is beneficial for all of our learners. And the other thing we've referred to previously, maybe your visuals aren't necessarily pencil, paper, drawn, written, posted, but we talked about, I happen to work in a school that has the DHH program, deaf or hard of hearing students. And so I've learned some basic sign language. And so the students are learning sign language because we have friends in our school that sign. And I use them for teacher prompts. So again, they've learned, say, to ask for the bathroom without interrupting the teacher, and I can either say no or yes. Different things like wait, I can ask them to stand or sit, and those signals, visuals for them, just helps create independence, less interruptions. So that's just been something, I guess, that I've been working on my last few years, using those as well.
Thank you. And Tara Lee, you're going to speak to explicit teaching.
Yes. So I know throughout the presentation, we've all talked about letting go of the perfect and making our visuals in the moment. Brooke talked about co-creating the wow pictures as references in her classroom. Lori mentioned the snowsuit, getting ready at the end of the day. Visuals. And part of the benefit of those visuals is referencing back to them and using them numerous times so that the students, again, can build that independence and come back to it. But I also think that we also look at using our visuals. Sometimes we only ever talk about them in literacy and numeracy, but also cross-curricular implications are there as well, whether that's building a brainstorming chart as a class on habitats, and then bringing that habitat visual back out and adding to it putting it away, bringing it back as you go through it. As well, in my class, a lot of times when we are doing a class writing assignment or lesson, I will often say, I wonder where I can find this information. How can I sound out this? Or what letters make this sound? And where can I find that? And so then we'll reference our sound wall. Um, in math, our students might reference a number poster or a poster that goes along with the unit that we're learning. And because we have modeled it numerous times through our direct teaching, then other students can say, oh, don't forget, we can look here to find this information. Even today, we were doing a math lesson about counting, and I said, oh, where could I find a tool that would help me figure that out? And they're like, oh, we have number lines on our name tags. So having students remind each other where they can use those is part of having those taught explicitly to them and modeling that as teachers.
Okay, thank you. So, um, just a few weeks ago, these teachers and I had a chance to come back together, and it's been a couple of classes since that they've had since we did the research. And one of the immediate comments was that things look so much different now. And I reminded them that that's okay. Some of it may be growth or change because of this project or other professional learning, and from their collaborations with each other and gaining ideas from each other, but also that they have a different group of students now, and that it's important that we're responsive to the students that we have. So I'll just open the floor to the teachers if they want to talk about any changes or had any other comments related to the changes of the practice.
So I think that as a teacher, you're always evolving. And I think Tara Lee and I talked about this in general is that when this study took place, it was our first year at a new school. So at our old school, we knew exactly how we wanted our visuals to look and what was best for those learners. And this was kind of our transition year as we stepped into a new school. And so you're figuring out the climate of the school as well as all the different personalities and that you have in your room. So I think like a big thing for me is that like I'm not afraid to leave a lot of empty spaces in my classroom. Like right now I have 3 completely empty bulletin boards. And that's okay because I know that I'm going to be building my extended sound wall after Christmas when we start our diagraphs and then moving on through the whole process of the continuum. And we're going to be building that together. And just recently, I actually had one that was blank, and now we're using it as kind of like we have like a Christmas village in our kind of it's like an empty water table almost. And the students then are labeling on the wall. They have like 1, 2, 3, 4. They're labeling what's inside. So they'll take it out and it'll sound out tree. Or on this side, they have sentence starters. They can say, I see a tree, and they start sounding it out. So things like that, like things evolve. And I think that's really important. And I also think that like as teachers, you just have to recognize what works for you and what works for your students. So there's things every year I will use over and over again. And then the next year, maybe I'll look at something else and I'll be like, no, that does no longer fits my personality, but also doesn't fit my style for my learners. So I think that as things change and evolve, your visuals will too.
Yeah, and that's what I would have to say, I guess, to add on to that with the new research that's out and new practices. Um, that some of the maybe even the visuals that we have on the website we wouldn't use anymore because there's new research suggesting we don't use that. So I think good teachers are reflective, and you're always refining your practices and changing those things up. And like we said, some things you've used one year. This year I don't need the what do I need to get started on my work strip because I have a pretty independent crew, but other years I might. So just knowing your learners and being responsive.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to speak to that? I think for myself, as Karen mentioned, like both of us were new to our schools, but also for me, the year that we did this, not only did I switch schools, I switched grade levels. So I had been with grade 2, 3, and grade 3, 4 for most of the few years beforehand. So going back down to a grade 1 and a 1, 2, I had to rethink about what was valid and what was needed in my classroom. And so that has changed over the last 2 years. I This year I have some very low verbal students, and so we use a lot of pictures of students. So whether that's their picture next to their name on their name tag, on their locker for their birthday for the birthday chart, it's their actual picture. Um, and just using that more. We also we're not using sign language like Lori, but we are using hand signals to for the bathroom, for water, for all of those things, and that has really created that independence within the classroom. And things that were on my bulletin boards when Mary first came out to us, they're not there anymore, and they're replaced by completely different things because it's that intentional part of it and using those visuals intentionally. And I also am like Karen, where I am good leaving blank bulletin boards and having blank space that we come up together. Anything to share?
Okay, thank you so much. So I know our time is growing short, but I hope you've all found the value in the stories and examples from the teachers like I have, and you're sensing their enthusiasm for this practice. I do want to make sure we have a couple of minutes to do a quick tour of the website, and I've just put the site in the chat for people who want to take a look at it more later. So if I can go ahead and hopefully share my screen again. Okay, now are you seeing Power Visuals?
Looks good. The power of visuals, you bet.
Okay, so Nicole had encouraged that we go ahead and do a website. So I had some help, as I acknowledged in the beginning, to do that. So if you are interested in reading all of the academic type stuff and seeing the data analysis and so on, that will be here. You'll notice that there is a full video presentation as well. Each of our panelists tonight was gracious to in the third interview, allow me to video the interviews, and we took clips and put things together. But you will also find, so if you want to see the full video is available, but you'll also find in each section, we have included shorter pieces of video to be able to help the teachers. So for example, if you want to see a video about key tips and findings rather than reading all of the information above, you'll be able to do that. And you'll see other literature reviewed here that you can certainly have a look at. But what teachers may most be interested in are the sections that follow. So the benefits, and then for each section, you will see that the benefits are listed, and often there are, as we said, the video piece and also sometimes handouts for you. So printable document that has an explanation. All of the handouts are branded into the Power of Visuals, and you've heard Brooke speaking to the Power of Visuals. So even though the title was supporting neurodiverse learners by using visual supports as the tier 1 intervention for the study, the video, or like all of the materials are branded as Power Visual. You will see that there are benefits and informational handouts within the website to help people to roll out use of visuals in each of these sections. And where possible, so for example, with the benefits to other adults, we made tips for consultants and coaches and considerations for other adults in the classroom that you can refer some of your staff to. Then there is a whole section on planning for success based on what we saw in the study. So again, the top keys, the school-wide planning is where you'll find those documents that I spoke to around a checklist of things to prepare or for administrators to look at as they are doing walkthroughs in classrooms. And then there is a whole section on the use of positive visual supports, that we don't want visual supports to only speak to corrective behaviors, that we also want to use them for celebrations and have the students refer to them, and questions to consider. Then you will find that there's a whole visuals bank that we've been referring to this evening. So each of the different categories has some different visual supports in Canva. Educators can receive a free full Canva account by following the process on the Canva website. However, all of the materials on Power Visuals were made with the free visuals that you don't have to sign up for Canva if you don't want to. When you go into some of those items, you will see that there's an editable template, and that's where you can go in and do all of the editing that you want to make the aesthetic your own. Or you can simply go to the copies that are there and print and use them. But we know there's a benefit to individualizing some of those pieces. So you will see a number of different visual supports here, and you are also welcome to provide some, if you would like, for upload for free use by teachers. All of the external websites we have permissions to use as teachers. You can't republish or sell, of course, but you have those options. And as we said, there's some supportive handouts for teaching as well. And then the piece you've been missing seeing all night is all of the visuals that these teachers have shared of their classrooms either currently or during the project. And they are split into those variety of categories there. So if you are looking for ideas around social emotional visual supports, literacy, numeracy, classroom routines, classroom expectations, or classroom events, and we're certainly open to adding more as you see. There's also a frequently asked questions section and a neurodiversity resources section, and I'll certainly post tonight have our presentation for you as well. So again, I just want to thank these teachers for giving of their time, and even though you were kind to say that I assured you you wouldn't be giving extra time, you're here on a December evening, so thank you. Um, Oh, sorry. One last thing I want to point out to you. There is a self-guided tour here or highlights by staffing role for people. And there is like a quick little pamphlet that gives the explanation here. You'll also find some other visual supports for adults throughout, like the key reminders and those types of things. So again, I am really humbled and honored that these teachers allowed me to journey alongside them and learn from them. And I'm really excited about all we learn. So I'm very appreciative. Again, to highlight those key factors of intentionality, co-creation, and explicit teaching as the keys. And I hope that everybody who's here this evening is going to walk away and think about what one thing they might do in their classroom. So Ted, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mary. That was fantastic, and the enthusiasm of Karen and Lori and and Turley and Brooke. Thank you very much. That was great. I spent the last hour thinking about a teacher I was supporting in the fall, a young phys ed teacher. He's like, Ted, these kids are in primary good. They get a K1 split. They don't know how to stand on the line. They don't know what it means shoulder to shoulder. They don't even know how to count to three at a water fountain. What am I supposed to do? And so I think I'm very excited about some of the stories you shared and the evolution that the teachers went through. Thank you for that as well. And I'm certainly excited about where this can go to support our teachers within our schools. So I have about a dozen questions that I'm going to narrow down to three. And so if somebody wants to interrupt me because they want to jump in, they're going to have to throw a hand up and jump in and interrupt me. So if I may, I'm going to start with you in regards to the visual sports you talked about. Um, is it better to start with a fully decked out visual classroom right at the start of the school year, or does it evolve? Sort of, okay, somebody jump in.
We'll jump in.
Feel very much jump.
No, our walls are blank. My walls are blank in September. And anything that goes up on my walls, the students I've taught or we've created together. So there nothing goes up without us teaching to or in my room. Yeah.
So did you learn that by accident, or was it a part of this process, or did you know?
Oh, we're old grizzled teachers. There's parts of my room that I do put up, like my whole math block area. We use it in the calendar area, like we use it like day 2. And so like that's a routine that we build, but lots of things in my room we do together. And so they're
It's been part of our practice for some time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm curious how your administrator could help support you on this tier one intervention strategy. What would be your wish, your ask of your administrator? Maybe not yours, maybe somebody else's. How could
I
the
think Mary
administrator?
talked about that as part of our challenges is that like something as simple as cardstock. For these visuals, we want to use them again. We want them to be durable. Um, we want to use some of them again. And so cardstock, that's $30 for a package, right? That's out of our own pocket. As part of this research, but we did have access to some of those things like magnets and Velcro and the laminating film, all those little pieces.
And we also said to Mary, like when we met, that we just met this past November to kind of recap everything. We said that like we thought like she was able to give this presentation of VPs and LRTs and we said this would be so interesting for principals to listen to because a lot of times principals are just so busy that they may not know understand the importance of visuals. So we were like, hey, that should be your target audience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Fascinating. Thank you for that. Um, what if how do you know when some students have mastered the visual supports and other students have not? What does that look like? What does it feel like? And how do you handle that? You can keep your microphones off if you like.
I can start, and then if you want to jump in. So we did find that, and we were aware that some students had commented that walls can get too busy, and that then it's hard to attend to anything at all. And then that also the piece about habituating to the visual support being there. It's like when you have a mess in your house, and then eventually you don't notice it anymore. And so we did actually play with that a little bit. So repositioning some things, taking photographs of some of the visuals and having them for individual students, or making a smaller visual that the student could have at their spot, but not every student needed to access for some ways that we did that. Do other people want to jump in?
Good. Okay. Um, Curious if one of the accidental benefits, or maybe it was a purposefully planned benefit, um, the purpose planning and the visual supports, did it add to the welcoming nature of your classroom and the culture of your classroom, or was that going a little bit too far?
We'll take that one. I don't know. Um, Definitely the kids take ownership in the co-created visuals. And I know that Brooke and I both use pictures of our students in our classroom. So it makes them feel like they are like the center of our classroom, which they are. And their parents, when they come in and they see, and the kids walk over and say, we did this with Miss Kemp or Miss Franklin, and this is what this is. And they can see themselves up on our walls. It definitely welcomes not only our students back in, but their families as well when they come in as well.
Nice, 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 nice. So let me ask you, what can the Federation do to support your work? Is there an evolution here? What comes next?
Well, I think one of the key barriers was that access to supports. And we were lucky that as a part of the grant project, I could provide some of that. And so I had shared the link specifically, though it is on the website under the planning piece, is that list of what's needed in terms of actual items and then what's useful in terms of professional development. And so that's something that certainly the Federation could support, whether it's, rollouts of some of those resources to classes, offering a professional development session. We did wonder, or I did wonder, if one of the big benefits that came up over and over again that I wasn't necessarily anticipating was that benefit of the teachers having time together, grade similar, to talk through some of those pieces, right? And they didn't feel like they often got opportunities like that. And so if there are opportunities for professional development where grade alike groupings from different schools can come together, I think people would see that as supportive as well, but I'll let the participants talk too.
I was actually going to say the same thing because I know that we found having those, we had some, um, mostly mornings, I believe, where we came in, the four of us with Mary, and just being able to brainstorm ideas back and forth with each other and be like, oh, I use this in my class. Maybe this would work for you. Or if none of us have that visual, but how can we brainstorm to come up with a visual that would help that student? Just having that time with teachers who aren't necessarily in our school,
Mhm.
but in our grade, really, really helped. And like I know I was just saying, like, I know Lori talked about her winter dressing visual that she has for her kids. And I was like, I have to pull that up because I need that for 2 kids in my class right now. And so just being able to share those back and forth with each other and having that time dedicated to it really benefited us.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Well, I'm going to pause my 7 seconds to see if anybody interrupts me. I see Nicole popped on, so I'm going to speed this up. And ladies, thank you so much for sharing your stories and your learnings, your wonders, and your enthusiasm. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And thank you, Mary, for sharing your research. In addition to your full-time duties, folks, it's absolutely amazing what you've been able to do. So thank you for that. I look forward to an expansion of some professional development, some professional learning opportunities for teachers. Um, Thank you for adding to the incredible bank of research projects that are being supported by the McDowell Foundation. And thank you so much for sharing with us tonight. Thanks for Alex for jumping in at the start, who is part of the Regina Teachers Executive, the association there in Regina. And I really appreciate the conversation that all of you you organized yourselves, and it came across very well. So thank you for that. That took some effort, and it was recognized. So I'll turn it over to Nicole now to bring us to a close. So thanks again for everybody, and thank you, Mary.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, again, just want to kind of echo that. Thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. The mission of the McDowell Foundation is to enrich teaching and learning by supporting professionally led research, supporting teachers such as these here tonight to ask questions about themselves, their schools, and indeed their profession. And that's why we are here. We are pleased to have been able to provide the space for these conversations and hope that they continue whether in staff rooms, classrooms, coffee shops, boardrooms, or any place where decisions around education are happening. Thank you to Mary, Tara Lee, Brooke, Lori, and Karen for sharing your knowledge and experience. Thank you for Ted for your support and leadership as moderator. And of course, thank you, Jay, for making sure that everything happened. The McDowell Foundation exists because we believe in the professionalism of teachers and the need to ensure that good research comes from all of us, not just from external places and spaces. Thank you to our many donors, including the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation, that allows us to ensure that this teacher voice and teacher experience continues to lead this conversation. For more information on this project or any of the other McDowell projects, or to maybe, donate some money to the foundation, you can visit our website. It's www.mcdowellfoundation.ca. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening.